And here we go again, back with the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. My name is Jason, sometimes known as the JTL. This is where we come on and, like crotchety old men, complain about stuff like tech and other things. Sometimes we say nice things, but most of the time, it's just this is the the tech crotchety hour, and that's what we're going to do today. So we got Adam here from the Tech Odyssey. I like saying the Tech Odyssey, just like I like
The Tech
saying the
Odyssey.
YouTube. You know,
The Tech
the
Odyssey, the
YouTube,
YouTube,
the
the
internet.
information superhighway.
That's right. Those world wild webs. Whatever I'm trying to say. Oh, and it's been, tis the season where not much is really happening in tech. I mean, there's we're kind of in a holding pattern for Black Friday when everybody loses their mind and such. But yeah, we kind of like the cycle of new stuff has kind of started to wind down. This
Yeah,
week
it was nice.
we got the new MacBook Pros, M3 series MacBook Pros from our good friends over at Apple. And as you can see, I did pick one up, and so we're going to talk about that. We might also talk about I don't know, what else are we going to talk about?
Well, it's really nice
Like,
too that they gave it to you for free, and all you had to do was just give them $3,500 to walk out the door with it. But the laptop was
yeah,
free.
yeah, yeah. No, it's a I did trade some stuff in, which was a new experience for me. I kind of felt like I was I kind of felt like I was a homeless person exchanging tin cans
Like, what
for
can I get for this?
yeah, it's like I don't know if you guys have it in your state, but in our state uh you can turn in like soda cans for 5 cents, right? So there's there's always a line, and I'm not laughing at homeless people. I mean, I know things happen and people have bad situations in their lives, and it leads to desperate measures. I get it, and it's not a good thing, but it is something that exists. And one thing that a lot of homeless people in this area do is they go around and they pick up soda cans wherever they can find them, and they have like big supersized garbage bags, and they take them to the grocery store where they have the little can. You feed them into the machine and it crushes them and then like tallies up how much money you can get
That's crazy.
for the
I've never
number.
seen anything like that. When
Yeah,
I was growing up, I used to see people that would be carrying around the bags and picking up the cans. And I think that industry has since died off here in Houston. But I mean, if they're keeping it alive in West Virginia and Iowa, then more power to them.
yeah, yeah. It's I can't remember if West Virginia still does it. They used to, but I know that Iowa does. And fewer and fewer states do it these days. There are some that still do 10 cents a can,
Well,
which is, I
whenever
mean, that's good
That's
money
good.
right there.
That's real good money. I mean, whenever I was a kid, and you probably when you were like a late adolescent, early adult, you
Yeah.
remember the glass bottles? You could get like 10, 15 cents if
Yes.
you took those back.
Yeah, I do. I remember collecting those to go get my baseball cards or some such thing, like kids were wont to do. Um, until I got a baseball card source. I used to go to this after
Yeah,
school daycare after elementary,
used to
and
hook
this
you up
kid
with
that I was
cards.
in class with, yeah, this kid that I was in class with, he'd go up to the convenience store and he'd have his book bag, and he would just like slyly walk through the aisles of the convenience store and dump entire boxes of baseball cards into his bag, and then come down and we'd go in the coat room of the daycare. It was in a Presbyterian church. We'd go in the coat room and like open baseball cards for the whole time that we were there. I don't know how he eventually got caught, I think, but you would imagine that if nearly every day all of your baseball cards are gone and you haven't sold them, then you'd like keep an eye out. But
I can imagine. I would think that would only last a few days, but that's
it was we did it for like a whole semester, like several months of baseball cards. Can you imagine the stack of like chalky, brittle gum that we had? Because you can't
hey, I
chew
used
that gum.
to. I mean, you can, but for like 12 seconds.
It turns soft for about 12 seconds and then it turns back into some sort of hard substance. Yes. I don't even, do they even put that in a baseball card
I don't know. Maybe
stuffing?
tell you what. I'm before the podcast next week. Maybe I'll go and buy a package of baseball cards, and we'll open it up and we'll see if there's still a stick of gum in there.
I mean, the only place to go get baseball cards these days that I know of is like Target. They have
That's what
like
I
a
was gonna say. Yeah,
row.
Target still has them.
Yeah. But they also have like Pokemon cards and all those kinds of things, which, I assume are more popular. Baseball seems less popular now than it's ever been in in the history of baseball. 130 years of baseball, and right now nobody cares except for,
Eh,
in the larger scheme of things, baseball doesn't seem like this. I remember in the 90s, weekly baseball games on national TV and like all that kind of stuff. But man,
oh,
it's hard to
baseball
watch a
and
baseball
basketball
game.
were my life when I was a kid.
Yeah,
I still
we
have
used to watch.
basketball cards from the '80s, man. I've got a big box. I used to collect all these things. Um, I've got Larry Bird's, Magic Johnson. I mean, like David Robinson's rookie card. I got all sorts of stuff,
Yeah,
but now I just collect tech.
yeah, I know. That's like I used to collect records. I used to collect comic books. I used to do all kinds of different things, and now I just spend way too much on tech. But anyway, we've gone far afield here, which seems to happen on a regular basis. We were talking about the MacBook and the fact that I traded things in for the MacBook. Now we only have one Apple store in the state of Iowa, and it's in our state capital, the great Des Moines, not Des Moines or anything. Des Moines.
It, I was so confused when I was growing up because I used to watch when I was a kid when I stayed with my grandma. I'd watch Regis and Kelly, or
Mhm.
Regis and Kathy Lee. And they were
Yeah,
like live from Des Moines. And I was like, "What is Des Moines?" Because I would see
yeah,
them say like Des Moines. I was like, "What is Des Moines?" And then they would say Des
yeah.
Moines. I'm like, "What?" It took a while to click.
Yeah, yeah, it's well, I knew how to pronounce it because we had a street near our house that was Des Moines Avenue, and I just always heard it pronounced that way, and then when I was old enough to read and I saw that it said Des Moines and
Yeah,
and
it put the two
and
and
we
two
pronounced
together.
it Des Moines, I was like, "Oh," and then
So
I
I've
learned it
got
was French
one.
and
Like I swear we're gonna actually talk about the MacBook here in a second. But since we're talking about not understanding how to pronounce weird things, so when I was in the military, and whenever I was doing my technical training for like my military police school, we were doing some land navigation stuff, and they got us a grid map for Bear County, which is where San Antonio is at.
right.
And I was confused because they gave me a map and it said, they're like, yeah, this is the map for Bear County. And if you are not from Bear County in Texas, you don't realize that it's spelled Bexar. And
Oh,
I was
okay.
like, excuse me, where my map says Bexar County, and they're like, no, you idiot, that's Bear. I'm like, are you sure?
Those the friggin' Mexicans and their silent X's, like,
I was
actually, they're
so
not all silent,
confused.
but
I was like, this makes no sense.
yeah.
Like,
No,
how
it's
is this fair?
yeah. Well, in this is somehow this is Texas related content right here. In New York City, there is an east to west road that runs across most of the island, and like in the southern third of the island, and it is spelled Houston.
Houston.
So most people would say what? Houston, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
but New York is Houston.
it's Houston, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's how you know when you live in New York, that's how you know that the person is like a tourist, right? Because only a tourist would come up and say, like, "Can you point me
Where's Houston?
towards Houston Street?" And
Well, hey,
and
only people in New York can pronounce Synecdoche as well.
Schenectady.
Or Schenectady. Yeah,
Schenectady.
yeah.
See,
Anyway,
yeah,
so there you go.
yeah, it's it I think that's also, like, a Native American thing, Schenectady. I think that was, like, a one of the tribes that
It's
the
probably the
Dutch,
tribe
like,
that sold New
bought the
York for the
island.
bag of pearls.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, "Oh, we've got some flour. We better we better vacate." I forget what they traded it for, but and I
It
have
was
no
bad.
idea, like, how apocryphal that story really is, but who knows? Yeah, so anyway, MacBook Pro, I have to go to Des Moines to go to an Apple store, right? And I looked up the trade-in values for the stuff that I had. I had my M1 Max Mac Studio.
Mhm.
and I had my iPhone 12 Pro Max. I was gonna do a video telling everybody why I decided to keep the 15 Pro Max, but uh, ultimately the reason is it's better than the 12 Pro Max, uh, which doesn't. See, here's my conundrum. Like, could I have kept using the 12 Pro Max and been completely happy with it? You know, in terms of day to day functionality, yeah, absolutely. But the 15 Pro Max is newer and nicer and has some different features, right? So anyway, I was going to make a video and I was just going to say that. So I saved everybody the 15 minutes and have just done what I was going to do with the 12 Pro Max. And I had an iPad 12.9, iPad Pro 12.9 inch with the M1 chip.
Yeah, I have one
And
of those laying around as a paperweight.
yeah, yeah. Well, see, I use mine, but I use it so rarely that I don't really think that I use it. And then I realized after I traded it that I have a gig this weekend, Friday night. I haven't played live. If you're new to the podcast or new to knowing who I am, in another life I was a musician and I still am a musician, but not as my main thing anymore. And so I have a gig on Friday, and so I've been practicing for the gig. But when I go to gigs, I always take an iPad and like a little mount so that I can read lyrics because I'm
Yeah, that's helpful.
too, like I just I just have this long list of cover songs that I can do, but I don't have them all set to memory. So
Yeah.
I just kind of have them up there and I can like follow along. Um, But then I realized last night, I was like, "Oh, wait, I don't have an iPad anymore. Like, what am I gonna
Well,
do on Friday at the gig?"
you can go
So,
get the 10.5-inch iPad for about 279 $300 right now. Like they've got some pretty good deals on those, and that would suffice.
I looked on bestbuy.com yesterday, and they were $400, and I'm like, "I know it's gonna be
Really?
like 250." Yeah, they were pretty expensive. I really want an iPad mini, and
Yeah, I
a
like
week
it's still
a
way
week
overpriced.
before though, they were $100 off, and I would pay $399 for one.
It's because 'cause they're trying to
But
rip people off right now, because people who are willing to buy them, prior to, like, 2 weeks from now, whenever they're gonna be on sale.
yeah, I know. I know. Well, Best Buy was like, "Oh, it's early Black Friday," and I was like, "Okay, so that means they're gonna have these prices for the whole rest of November, right?"
Uh.
Not so fast, my friends. They jacked those prices up. So I keep getting off track. The MacBook Pro. Now I wanted to well, I'll tell the story of how I got it and why I felt like I was trading in tin cans. Like, you walk into the Apple Store, and the Apple Store is all like, Scandinavian and looking with like clean white tables and floors and everything else. And you're like walking in with arms full of tech, like, "Hey, I just collected this tech off the side of the road. Can I trade it in? Can
Like,
I trade it in for a new computer?" And so they gave me $1,100 for the Mac Studio,
mhm,
which it's the M1 Mac Studio, so it's not the current model. And I bought
mhm,
the M1 a while back because I got $200 off because it was $200 cheaper than the new model.
mhm.
Um, so I had it up on eBay and I was looking at the prices that it was going for, and it was going for like 399, and that's not the greatest, but it's not terrible for like one model back. But then I started thinking, if I sell it on eBay, then I have to, I got eBay fees and I got, they charge you fees like 8 ways from Sunday these
Oh,
days.
yeah, so if you
Eh,
sold it for 399, you might walk away with 330, 320.
No, I mean, on larger purchases like that, I always lose like $100 at least.
Oh, it's terrible.
So, like, if you sell anything for less than $1,000, something that's like reasonably priced, you can get away. The fees aren't too bad, and you can get away with what feels like the majority of the money that you sold it for. But if you sell something like a computer that's $1,000 plus,
You take it the
it
shorts.
always feels, yeah. They just so anyway. I would have realized from that sale probably $1,200. give or take a little bit, depending on fees and where I had to send it to, et cetera, et cetera. So I just figured, convenience-wise, taking the trade for $1,100 would be fine. They gave me $450 for the 12 Pro Max, which is about what I could sell it for.
That's fair.
And they gave me $510 for a 256 gigabyte M1 iPad Pro 12.9. So
Not terrible.
I only, including tax, paid $500 for the MacBook, and this is the new M3 Pro MacBook Pro 14-inch with 18 gigs of RAM. I keep calling I continue to call it RAM, but I think officially you're supposed to call it unified memory, which I don't know. I mean,
yeah, it's so weird the way that they do that. I mean, I understand that it's faster, it's more streamlined, it's easier for sharing resources, and
yeah,
there are
it's no
benefits
longer
to
like
it.
separate, but
It's not.
they keep trying. Yeah, they keep trying to like rename things for Apple specific uses, but it's memory, it's RAM, it's whatever you want to call it. It just happens to be positioned in the system differently than x86 computers
I
would
do like
position its RAM.
though. I do like though that they have upgraded it to 18 gigabytes. Because here's the thing: when you have RAM, random access memory, which it's funny if they call it
Yes.
random, it should be select access memory, because you're like designating what goes there. But anyway,
Yeah.
random access memory. Traditionally, like mine, I have the MacBook Pro 14-inch 2021 with the M1 Pro. I have 16 gigabytes. See, what they bumped it to 18, because your computer already uses a certain amount of dedicated memory space. So it's already using a
Right.
certain portion of your RAM to load
Right.
system files and things like that. So if you have 16 gigs, you don't really have 16 gigs free. You probably more like 14.
Right.
So when they give you
Yeah.
18, it's like you have the actual 16 for free.
So what I do when I get a new Mac is I'll open up the activity monitor and go to memory and watch what uses what, and like how they call it memory pressure, how much pressure is being put on the system, how much RAM is being used, and now
That's
these
after you sacrifice the chicken, right?
yes, of course.
Okay. Just making sure we're
um,
on the same page
but
here.
yeah, um, but they also use swap memory, which grabs a chunk of memory from the hard drive and uses it as like just a little bit extra.
Yeah.
So what I was curious about when I saw that they had bumped it to 18, they never said anything about that in the event that announced these computers. Now it's 18, so still 8 at the bottom, right?
Hmm.
But then it's 18, 36, 96. I forget what I don't know if 48 is still 48. I haven't looked at that, but
I doubt it.
yeah, so it's they're giving you like I have a feeling that one way or the other, and I have a theory about the way that they price their storage as well, but they're both based on the same theory. So 18 is 2 more than 16, 36 is 2 more, there's
Just four
4
more.
more than
Yeah.
32. So somehow they've added another gigabyte to
They're basically
a quote
doubling the
unquote
extra overflow beyond the normal
right.
16, 32, 48. 48 is probably 52 now, or 54.
Yeah, and I guess we could look and see, but
We could if we had the
um,
internet.
well,
I'm
we
waiting for
do
somebody
have
to invent
access.
it.
Yeah, man, my life would be so much easier if if the internet hadn't been invented yet. Okay, so I'm at apple.com here, MacBook Pro. Let's just go to M3 Pro, and we'll scroll down here and select a random configuration, and we'll go down, and it is no. So it's 36,
Mhm.
48, 64, 96. So
So if you
past
get
36, it's all the same.
that's weird. I
Yeah.
guess they figure at that point you have so much storage, so much RAM that you don't need the extra kicker.
And the thing is, like, I had thought, okay, this is a great idea on Apple's part. They're doing something for us, quote unquote, for free. You know, they're giving
Mhm.
us like an extra 2 GB of random access memory. Uh, and there and so what my hope was, and the problem that I'd always had when I had 16 GB M series Macs is that if I was running a heavy program like Final Cut Pro, it would like Final Cut Pro just makes as it works, it makes things bigger.
Yep.
So you might start out with like a 5 GB video file, but as it does things to the video file, it just grows, and suddenly like you have 150 GB like a 150 GB project, right? And you can get rid of the stuff that it's generated and make it smaller, but if you're working on it, it's just going to generate that stuff again.
Mhm.
So once you get working on a Final Cut Pro project, it balloons in size and the amount of RAM that it uses also gets bigger.
Yep.
And so when I've had 16 GB in the past, I've always sort of like bumped up right to the edge, and then it would start using like more swap memory. And unlike other computers that just kind of start acting funky,
Mhm.
like that you overload the RAM and it's just not really working the way it's supposed to. These M1 Macs will continue to work, but it'll be like somebody punched them in the face and it's just kind of like dazed, and not
Yeah.
really like kind of. And so I was like, okay, maybe this 2 GB of RAM is going to be that like that efficiency RAM that's going to take care of all that other stuff
Mhm.
in that has to be accessed and kept in a cache and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But when I edited a video yesterday, I have cleaned my Mac X on my computer.
Mhm.
And when you get to a certain point with memory, it'll warn you and say, "Hey, you're getting
Reaching your
toward
limit.
your memory limit.
Mhm.
So you might want to close some things." And so I said, "Okay, what can I close?" And it just said Final Cut Pro.
Mhm.
And it was using 10 GB of RAM. And I was just like, "Okay, that's not right. That seems excessive." But I went to the activity monitor and I looked, and it was using 14 gigabytes of the onboard RAM.
Oh,
It's
it'll
using
use it,
like
and
but it
I've
wasn't
come
it
to
was it had 3 something gigabytes of cache, but it
Mhm.
still said that it had, and it was using a gigabyte or so of swap,
Mhm.
but like it didn't seem like it was using all of the RAM, like the extra, not even like up to 16, not even up to 18. It wasn't using everything. So I wonder if that's
It
a
could
Final Cut
be
Pro problem.
it could be a thing to try and prevent overflow with the memory where, like, they always leave a buffer, because the problem is if you completely fill up the memory, you still have to be able to move like, use some of the system files and some of the other stuff, like,
Right,
they probably use a swap memory, and the swap memory, for those of you who don't are not aware what it is, basically you've got your RAM, and a lot of people confuse this. They're like, "Oh, I need more memory," because you think memory is where you store things, right? But memory is actually where
right,
with the computer is where you recall something to where you're using it
right,
immediately on your computer, and the hard drive is called storage space.
right,
So swap memory is when you need extra memory and then it runs out, so it starts using your hard drive. Now use some
right,
of your hard drive space. Now this is much more inefficient. It's better than it used to be because we have solid state drives now and the read write speeds are a lot higher. But traditionally, when you open a file, when you load an image, when you're editing a video, it loads it into your memory. So that way your computer actively has it there and it's very fast
right,
to work on it. It's not having to
right.
pull it from your hard drive. So yeah, whenever you start putting using swap memory, that means that you're using your storage space and it's much slower.
Yeah. And when I had so my Mac Studio was 32 gigabytes of memory, right? And whereas when I used 8 gig, like, so the machine that I use for live streaming, video recording, all that kind of stuff, is just a base M1 Mac Mini, 256 gigabytes of storage, 8 gigabytes of RAM.
Mhm.
And it works perfectly, but I only use it for this purpose, right? So
Mhm.
I don't have like other heavy lifting programs that I run on this or anything like that. So, it works perfectly. But whenever I've used an 8 gigabyte or a 16 and now 18 gigabyte M series Mac, they have always used some swap memory. Like, regardless of how much memory you supposedly have left or anything like that, whenever I look at activity monitor on the memory tab, I see that it's using swap memory, even if it's only using, half of the memory that's there, right?
There's got
When
to
I
be
go and But the 32 gigabyte one, from what I could tell, never uses swap and never caps out.
Well, that makes
And
sense
so I
because when you have 32 gigabytes of RAM, like that's a ton. Like you're most probably 90% of people are never going to fill up the 32 gigabytes of RAM. Like that's difficult. You got to have probably you're working with ProRes. You got 5 or 6 video streams going. I mean, you're making like a Mr. Beast video. You're not making a video
right,
like near you. But the
right.
thing with 16 is it's for 4K video editing, especially when it added some photos, maybe 2 or 3 streams. If you're doing some B-roll, like 16 seems it feels inadequate.
Yeah, yeah, which is, why I was hopeful that 18 would sort of be that little bit extra that you needed in order to make 16 more comfortable.
Yeah,
I haven't
not so
had
much
any
so.
other problem I haven't had any other problems with the machine in the few days that I've been using it, but I got really frustrated. Not that it stopped me from making the video, finishing it, but it was literally one 4K stream of video,
Mhm.
one video file. I didn't have any titles, I didn't have any color grades, I didn't have any of that stuff. And it wasn't even multicam because I have this set up now where I can record straight to the computer, and I've got my Stream Deck here so I can do the camera angle switches automatic, like, here on the fly. So, you know, I, so it was just one video file, and it
Mhm.
was MP4, so it shouldn't have really been causing it any problems or anything like that. So I looked when I looked and saw that it was using so much RAM. I then went to the CPU, and it was like bouncing between 3 and 5% of the CPU. So I'm like, oh my god, like, how could there be this big a bottleneck?
Well,
And
the
I
thing
have a
is,
feeling
sorry, go ahead.
I posted this on Twitter, and some people suggested this might be the issue, um, that maybe they haven't. Well, I know they haven't released the updated Final Cut Pro for these new M3 chips,
Mhm.
and so it could be that in terms of RAM usage or something like that, Final Cut just doesn't know that there's more there. I
I mean, that's a
I don't know how this
possibility.
works. But that's what it seemed like. It seemed like, there's 4 gigabytes of RAM sitting there that it's not using, and it's like telling me that it's overloading. And and so maybe it's a software optimization thing. Maybe it's an operating system optimization thing. I've seen lots of other reports from other YouTubers and people who have gotten these new machines that they've been having some problem with speed compared to previous models. Daniel from oh man, I'm blanking on his channel name. Anyway, he does all tons of Apple content, and he was having trouble getting the M3 stuff to export video at all.
Yeah, I
So
imagine there could be 3 things going on here. One is Final Cut Pro has not been updated to take advantage of the extra RAM because it's going to use the resources it's allocated and programmed for. And if it's like some weird kind of, it depends on how the memory's set up too. They could still only be using the 16 gig and then using that for some weird dedicated RAM that you can't even touch. Just like whenever you have like Android, for instance, when it loads up,
yeah,
it automatically just takes the 2 gigs, and like you can never use that, even though
right.
it's part of your RAM. They count it. So there
Yeah.
could be it could be an app thing, it could be an OS thing, and but yeah, I guess really two things. But it's funny you talk about only using 3 to 5% of the processor. That's because once you load those files into memory, it's really not using the processor all that much
Right.
until you go to export. And then when you go to export, it's going to be at like 90%. it's going to
Yeah.
be it's going to be
Ma-
throttling that
And
out.
that's what I even exported this. So this was a sponsored video. I always give the sponsors a chance to see the video to correct any errors or anything like that.
Right.
Um,
Standard fare.
and and so I was just exporting at 1080p because I usually upload it to Google Drive and give them a link and they can check it out. And then they approve it. I go back and re-export it at 4K. So
Yeah.
I exported at 1080p. It did it fast. I didn't really pay attention. So I think that this is something that I probably will make a full video on here in the near future. But I've been thinking about a lot as these new Macs are coming out. There was a conversation on a Twitter space that I was in yesterday where somebody was saying like why is Apple coming out with all these new versions of the M series chip? They just came out with the M1, then there was the M2, and now there's the M3.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, the M1 came out in November of 2020. So it's a 3-year cycle, give or take. And that makes sense. And of course the M3 chips are 3 nanometer, which means they're more efficient and they're faster, all that stuff.
I mean, we run into
Um,
this all across the board. I mean, we make a
yeah,
new Snapdragon chip for phones every year. Intel comes out with a new i3, i5, i7. It's just part of the circle of life in hardware.
and the conspiracy theory is that they just do this incrementally so they can bring out new products every year,
Well,
right?
duh.
Maybe maybe there's some truth to that, but I know in the case of the M3 chips that Apple's been working on this 3 nanometer process for a long time, and
Yeah,
we thought
we
we were
actually
going to get 3 nanometer with the M2, and we didn't.
we
So
so the 3 nanometer I think has been elusive. 5 nanometer they had down pretty good, and it was funny because last year there was a lot of rumors. People were making reviews and news articles saying that the Google Tensor 2 was a 4 nanometer chip, and it took about three
right,
days after it actually came out for people to realize that no, it was still a 5 nanometer chip. And that was the same thing we had this last year with some of the other chips they where
right,
we went from the triple eight and then to the 8 generation 1, the 8 plus generation 1, they were five nanometer.
yeah,
So
yeah,
there was something going on with the 3 nanometer process. I think they were having a really hard time trying to iron it out.
yeah, and I can't claim to really know how or why or anything like that. Nanometer stuff is like way deep in the weeds for the majority of people, and I've heard it explained before, so I have a general idea of it's about how many transistors you can get onto like one die of a piece of silicon, right? I mean that's basically it. But that the more you get
Yeah.
on, as I understand it, the more efficient the chip can be, the more powerful the chip can be, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, a lot of it
Um,
has to do with distances and traveling for like the electricity and things like that. Because as the chip gets smaller and smaller and smaller, you need to use less energy to create the same amount of power effectively,
right.
is like the best way I can explain it. So when you give it the same amount of juice and you have a smaller chip, then and you have more transistors, then you just more power.
Yeah. More power, more speed, more
Le-
efficiency as well, because it's
yeah.
yeah. And so that's kind of deep in the weeds for most people to sort of understand. But I think that what gets lost in the weeds, especially when you're doing stuff like what we do every day. Oops, stay there, microphone. What we do every day. I mean, we talk about these new products like all day, every day, ad nauseum when a new product comes out, and you get into this like this reality distortion field of like the new product is the only thing that matters. And so I think if you're somebody who watches tech content, I mean this happens with any product, right? I just bought a new car, and so you get into this thing where like all the hype is for the newest model, and you kind of discount the previous models just because you think that the new model has to be the best. However, there there's no reason that if you have an M1 series chip, M1 regular, M1 Pro, M1 Max, M1 Ultra, whatever, you don't need the M3 version of that chip.
No.
The gains that you would realize, especially if you bought yourself like an M3 Ultra Max Studio that cost $4,000 out of the gate, if you bought yourself one of those, then you have to start thinking about I assume that you have either a business that needs you to have that power, or B, more money than sense. And and for the people who are in the B category, they're probably going to buy the new thing anyway. For the people in the A category
Well,
who are
sometimes you
just
can be the
buying,
A and B category at the same time.
yeah, I know. I mean, I'm talking about I'm wrapping myself up in this as well. And then I make myself feel better by saying like, well, I have to talk about new products because that's what I do. So yeah, it's a vicious cycle that wears on my mental health. But that's another story. If you've got a $4,000 Mac Studio that you bought a year and a half ago,
You don't need
right?
the new one.
Yeah, you don't need the M2 Ultra. You don't need the M3 Max. You don't. The thing that, okay, I'm not gonna. You can stick with what you've got, and it's going to be good for you for 3, 5, 6, 7 years for you to get the maximum value out of that purchase. Like when you start to think about taxes and depreciation that you can claim and all that kind of stuff, like you want to get maximum value out of that, then you keep it for the 3 to 5 years, and then you upgrade, and you'll be able to see a real
Different.
difference.
Oh, it's
And
comical to me. I see all the time. Everybody's got to keep up with the Benjamins on Twitter. Of course, I do this every year with the phones. I make phone reviews for a living, so I get the new phones. I don't make a living off of reviewing laptops.
right,
So when it comes to the MacBook Pro, I was looking at it and I'm like, I would like the M3 Pro, but I honestly don't feel like I need the M3 Pro. I just need more RAM for my M1 Pro, which unfortunately I can't upgrade because
right,
I feel like the processor is able to handle it just fine, but I'm bottlenecked with 16 gigabytes of RAM. And I thought 16 would be fine because I
right,
originally bought the Mac Mini with 8 and the M1. And then I was like, okay, this is okay, but I need a little bit better. So I went with the M1 Pro 16 gigabyte higher video core GPU cores laptop, the MacBook
right.
Pro 14 inch.
So that would
And
have been the $2,400 model.
yeah, it was 24.99, and that was fantastic and all that stuff. But I run into similar issues with you, where it's like when I'm working with multiple video files, I'm putting in B-roll or photos. Like I'll put it in, and like the image won't show up for the video file, or it'll like turn red, and I might have to close Final Cut Pro every once in a while, or it won't show the wavelengths for the audio, or yeah,
Right.
just different
Yeah.
things. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
this seems like a RAM issue.
Yeah. It takes a little time to render that stuff out.
Mm,
And the reason that I previously had a M1 Max Mac 16-inch MacBook Pro. But a lot of times what ends up happening to me is that I feel like, oh man, I spent $3,600 on this thing. That's too much money. My dog is barking. I don't know why.
dogs being
This is
dogs.
what happens, when you work at home. This happens. When you have a yippy dog that doesn't know how to keep its trap shut. Anyway, um,
He won't be
so
here for next episode.
yeah, um, no, she's a great dog. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I had this $3,600 computer, and I swore to myself I was going to buy that computer, and that was going to be the computer. But whenever I spend that much money on something, after a period of time, I'm like, nah, that's so much money. That's so much money that I spent on that thing. So I decided to trade it in for the M3 or the M1 Max Studio.
Mhm.
The only difference between the two machines was the fact that the base Studio has 512 gigabytes of storage, and that MacBook had a terabyte.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to do the same thing again, get a Max, get an M3 Max, and 32 or 36 or whatever gigabytes of storage. But again, it's that like $3,600 thing. And I know it might seem like we YouTubers live the high life, but I didn't have $3,600 to go drop. I'm trading in stuff to get this computer because I missed having a laptop. Um, there was a time where I wasn't traveling or going anywhere, and so having only a desktop as my main computer was totally fine, right? But now I find myself needing to move around a little bit more, and I can't. So the Mac Studio wasn't like as practical a machine as it maybe had been when I first purchased it, right?
Mhm.
So so I was hoping that I could get this 14-inch with 18 gigabytes of memory and be okay. It remains to be seen. I'm going to give it some more time than I usually would because in order to return it, I have to drive 5 hours back in like one way.
That that that's
You know, so
yeah, that's a significant time investment right there.
yeah, I have to drive, and some people were like, "Well, just go back to your old machine." I'm like, "Well, I would, but I just traded it
It's
in."
gone.
I don't
Yeah,
think
I
I can up there and say, "Hey, can you give me that Mac Studio that I had back?" So
I
I'm kind of stuck.
Yeah, that's a difficult position. I had bought an M1 Mac Studio last year because I wanted to try it. Like I got one when they were like the M2s came out and the price had dropped, and I wanted to see if it was substantially better than what I had, and it did have more RAM. And I noticed the difference. But the main reason I took it back because I bought it to try out before I worried about trading anything in because I had my
Right.
M1 Pro. But the thing is I am so dependent on my laptop.
Yeah.
I never thought I would be a laptop like worker person, but I'm gonna be quite honest. 70% of the time I'm editing my videos is while I'm laying at bed at 2 o'clock in the morning with my AirPods in while my wife is asleep. Like I
Right.
record out here in
Yep.
my office, and I'm like, all right, taking this in the house, and then I just go in, airdrop it on my laptop. I edit while I'm laying in bed, like while I'm watching a movie on my phone at like 2 in the morning, and but of course for travel and things like that too. But if I
Yeah.
had it to do over again, I would have probably still got the M1 Pro, but 32 gigabytes of RAM.
Right.
And my original purpose when I got it was okay, this is going to last me 3 years, and
Yeah.
I'm on 2 years, and I really still feel not that much need to upgrade, other than just I would like more RAM. Like I
Yeah.
nothing else would I change.
Yeah. And what makes it hard is you can't pick and choose easily with Apple because what Apple offers certain configurations off the shelf and then
Hmm.
everything else is a special order. And sometimes the configurations that they offer are stupid, right? You've got 512 as a base storage, and then you can pay, several $100s more for for like another 512, right?
Oh yeah, it's
And
ridiculous.
so Apple did add a new configuration this year. They added a 16-inch, 36 gigabytes of storage of memory, right? And 512 gigabytes of storage.
Who would do that? Here's
And
the thing.
it's like $2,800,
That
29
is
28.99.
that is asinine.
Yeah.
So, just for some context, if you need 36 gigabytes of RAM to edit a video project, likely you're working with 40 to 60 gigabyte video files worth of video
And
files, even
then
maybe more than that.
as we were just talking about the fact that once you start working with those files inside of Final Cut,
It duplicates them.
then yeah, I mean it starts to expand and you could have
Mhm.
very quickly a 250 gigabyte project, right?
And yeah, if you're working
So
with ProRes, you could easily have a 200 gigabyte video project. And then it's like, well, I made one video on this and now I have to erase everything off of my laptop.
yeah, and so my Mac Studio was 512 and I figured because it's desktop based and because I have a Thunderbolt M.2 drive caddy, so I
And
can
that's
work
fine.
off that, you know. But if you're talking laptop, ideally you don't want to have to carry around an extra 2 terabyte hard drive, right?
No.
If you're and you shouldn't have to. So to me, I look at that configuration and I was thinking about getting it. I didn't really want the 16-inch because 16 inches, the 16-inch machine is huge. And since I
Oh,
have like this giant monitor back here, I just don't feel like I need a huge laptop on top of it. And there's no difference in power. So 14-inch is great. And if they would have made a 14-inch, now see, this is like the Goldilocks Apple problem, right? If they would have made a 14-inch, 36 gigabyte, 1 terabyte machine that was $2,800, I would have bought that in a second. Like, that
yeah,
is
that's
the
the ideal machine.
perfect machine, right?
Mhm.
That's the perfect machine for a base model, and if I wanted 2 terabytes of storage, then I would have paid their, exorbitant extra fee to get that, but right off the shelf, I can go and buy one that has the amount of RAM that I want and the amount of storage that is reasonable, right?
Yeah, and that's what I want. When I was like on a whim specking them out to see what it would cost because of my internal electronics and enthusiast addict nature. I did
Mhm.
look at it, but then I quickly talked myself out of it and said, okay, maybe next year. Honestly, what's probably going to happen is next year when the M4s come out, I will buy an M3, probably an M3 Max with
Yeah,
1 terabyte, and save some money on it next year because I what we're going to see next year likely is just what like we got with the M2, a slight upgrade on the M3 process,
right.
maybe 10-15% improvement, but at a new cost. So I'll
Right.
just buy the M3 Max next year and save some money.
Yeah. Yeah, which for me, I was hoping to do that as well. And so when I saw that new configuration, I was like, "Oh, I can get an M3 Pro chip, not have to go all the way to the Max chip, but an M3 Pro chip with 36 gigabytes of memory." Then I was like, "Well, that's exactly the sweet spot where I need to be. I don't really need the Max chip,
Mhm.
but it's the only off the shelf configuration where you
With
can
one
get
terabyte.
that 36. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
And
36. Yeah.
so I talk about this Goldilocks thing that Apple does. It's sort of like a reverse Goldilocks, really, because it's like Apple is always like blue balling you with their prices and configurations because it's like, here's the perfect configuration that you need, and we could
Yeah,
very easily make that,
but
but
we
we're not
won't.
gonna. We're gonna make like two stupid configurations and force you to upgrade it
But it's
and
only two hundred
spend all.
dollars more, Jason.
I know that's like the magic number. I've always believed that $200 when you're talking about a tech product, whether it's just a single product that costs $200 or an upgrade that costs $200, that's like the magic number. Where
Hmm.
at least if you're like you and I, you're likely to say, well, okay, it's only $200, right? The only
Well, I
thing
mean,
that
you're already
keeps me
spending
from
2,600. Why not spend?
yeah. Well, the only thing that keeps me from doing that when it comes to buying an Apple computer is because I'm a tech addict, I want the instant gratification of paying for the thing and then taking it home.
Yeah, you don't
I
want to
don't
wait.
want to have to wait like 3, 4 weeks for my computer to come
But they sell you
because
the
I j
max model with the RAM that you want for just
yes.
$200 more. But then if you want to get the extra storage on top of that, then it's another 200, but you're already 200 in, so
Yeah.
why not just spend 400 extra and you get everything you want?
And the crazy thing is, I mean, it it seems crazy, and I'm sure to like the average person, they'd be like, "That's a totally insane thing." But if you wanted to max out the M3 Max, you get 128 gigabytes of RAM and 8 terabytes of storage. Um, the only problem with that is you end up paying $8,000.
Oh, it's insane. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Like you see people and then last year they maxed out the M2 and this year they maxed out the M3 and I'm like, "One, I've seen the videos you're making and I know you don't need that much and like you know you don't need that much, but a lot of people I don't know. I mean, if I had $8,000 to sink into it to make a video called maxed out M1, maxed out M3 MacBook Pro, review, then maybe I
Yeah,
would. But
I think that it's like they're just working on an economy of scale that I'm not a part of. We're like spending that on the I mean, it's a tax write-off, I guess you could say that.
I mean, it is a
Um,
tax write-off, but at the same time, it's like I don't know. I wonder if like we look at something like that and go, "That's unnecessary," and then like MKBHD watches our video and like, "God, these guys are like cavemen."
yes, that's the thing. I mean, I know Justine, she always gets herself a maxed out model every
But I
year.
mean, if you look
Um,
at her, I mean, her name is Justine. I mean,
yeah,
she lives and breathes Apple everything.
yeah, yeah. And I think sometimes maybe on in their case, um, they're doing it maybe because, like, it's a comfort factor. They know they're
Mhm.
not gonna throw anything at the laptop that is gonna ever give them a problem, right? The and s
There's some comfort in that.
that was kind of my reasoning with getting the Mac Studio or getting, like, the $3,600 M2 M1 Max laptop is that I know everything that I do, and I know that at least in terms of RAM and CPU and GPU, I'll never throw anything at this machine that that will be a problem.
Mhm.
It's only the storage that really becomes the problem. And so I've been doing some math in my head because you can go from 512 to 1 terabyte, and I think it's like $400, but then
I think it's 200,
it's
like
200 there, but it's 400 to go to
400 for the
two
RAM.
terabytes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you go to 2 terabytes, 4, but if you go up to the next storage option from 512 to 1 terabyte, it's 200. But if you go from 16 or 18 gigabytes to 36, it's like 400. So then
right,
if you want to go up 2 increments, like 1
right.
increment in storage and 1 in memory, it's $600, which is just crazy to me.
And so I've been thinking about this, and I think I understand why the storage prices get so crazy, and it might also explain the memory prices as well. So I know that the way that they configure these memory modules is they do two, right? So there's like a 512 and then another 512, and that gives you 1 terabyte. And that's why you can go
Mhm,
there for $200. But if you want to go 2 terabytes, then you got to have a 1 terabyte and a 1 terabyte, and those are like twice as expensive,
mhm.
right? And then you want to go to 4 terabytes, you need two terabytes.
Yeah.
And so I think I understand why the prices go up the way that they do, but it doesn't make it any easier. And I know that you can go out and get like an 8 terabyte SSD, and it's not gonna be a big problem. It's not gonna cost $800, you know?
Mhm.
I think they charge $1,200 for 8 terabytes, which
Yeah, it's kinda
by my
crazy,
math
like
by my math, if that's the way their internal math works in terms of how they have to configure the deal, you gotta do 4 terabytes and 4 terabytes,
mhm.
and upgrading to 4 terabytes is $600, then, if you do that math, I guess it makes sense, but ultimately, it seems exorbitant. But the one thing you can say about Macs is that you are getting the fastest, bestest storage that is available on the market. And yeah, you
Or
can go to Amazon.
as our friend Little Caesars would say, the extra most bestest.
Yes. And and that ultimately the speed goes up as you go up in size. And so you're getting efficiencies of scale, right?
Yeah, you're getting
Or
faster
economies
RAM
of
too,
scale.
because
Yeah.
it goes from like
But it,
1,600 megahertz to like 2,000 or like 21 to 2,600. I don't know what it goes up.
yeah. Yeah. I forget. I think they're doing DDR5 RAM now, and I forget what different the different megahertz configurations are as you walk up that ladder. But yeah, ultimately very expensive. However, and the only way that you can ever justify the expense is if either A, your daily workload demands that kind of power,
Mhm.
or B, you're going to have that computer over the long term to the point where that thousands of dollars investment is gonna is gonna make it worthwhile for you.
Oh,
And
yeah,
it's a
like I
different
had
it
so go ahead.
Go ahead. Good no,
I was
you
gonna
go
say
ahead.
I had a tremendous amount of heartburn buying a $2,500 laptop But then I'm like, okay, Adam, you make 400 videos a year,
Yeah.
and this is your livelihood, and it pays. It will more than pay for itself. So I'm like, okay, I will go ahead and buy it. Yes, it is a business expense. Yes, it was the $2,500 model, not the $8,000 model. Like I would
Right.
have a stroke if I tried to spend that much money on a laptop. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's if you need it, like you know that you need it,
Yeah.
and it will work out well for you for many, many years. And my plan, like I said originally, was for this to last me 3 years, and it's going to do that quite easily. I do
Yeah.
just wish I had a little bit more RAM to facilitate some more smoothness when working with multiple streams
Yeah.
of like media when I'm editing. But otherwise, like it's just been such a fantastic machine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, for me, I think the thing that ultimately put it over the edge was Space Black. I
Oh
just,
yeah, I would pay an
like
extra 4 grand for that.
I was just like, well, my Mac Studio is chugging along quite fine, but I would love to have a laptop, and that Space Black is sexy.
It's just like when you
So
get a red sports car. I mean, they go faster
yeah,
than all the other colors.
I just got a red car.
Yeah,
So
you have your red Bronco. Very cool.
yeah, Bronco Sport. And the funny thing is, I did a lot of shopping. I knew like generally what size car we wanted, did a lot of shopping. The Bronco Sport is on the market right now, in my estimation, one of the best looking compact-ish SUVs that you can get.
It's a sharp looking
Um,
car.
and it's practical in a lot of ways. It's not overpowered, it's not anything else, but like the Heritage model that I got that looks like the original 1966 Bronco is a base model with a trim package. And so instead of being $50,000, it's like it starts at like 33.
So
And
does the front windshield fold down like the old '60s Broncos?
no, no, unfortunately, like the real Bronco, the bigger one that they came out with several years ago, it
Hmm.
does like you can take the doors off and all that kind of stuff, but the Bronco Sport is on the same wheelbase and the same sort of infrastructure as like the Escape
It
or the
reminds me of the
Maverick
Bronco
truck that
too,
we
but less OJ-ish.
yeah, yeah, but I like it a lot, and I feel like I got a good deal on it considering like what I would have spent on you know, a Ford Edge, which is like $5,000 more expensive. And, you go up from there, you go to Toyota, you go to Honda, and those things are elevated a little bit more in price. They're very good vehicles. Don't get me wrong, but
I think the
I wanted
Bronco's
to hit a
neat.
price point.
And,
Yeah,
and it's nice too because it just gives you that extra level of flexibility. Like if you ever unalive somebody, it's perfect for the freeway. Like they're
true.
great for cop car
Especially
chases.
if you're going to go at low speed. If you're going to travel at 45 miles an hour on the freeway after you've committed a capital crime, then it's the perfect vehicle for you. But I hear the dog barking again, and usually we have like so much time that we can do this. But my wife has just come home, and I have to take her somewhere, and that signals the time that we have to end the podcast. So this is like real life podcasting where real life interrupts,
Yeah, where real
and
life happens, where we
yeah,
it's proof that we do have lives outside of our homes.
I know. Well, sort
Well, at
of.
least for you anyway. I have no credit. I have no credibility.
So that's got to be the end of the podcast, there, folks. It's a rude and brief and abrupt stop to the podcast, but we are under 1 hour, and that's something we've been hoping that we could get to eventually. So, Adam, thank you again for the
Sure.
co-hostage, and all you people who are out there, do hit the like and subscribe button. Come back to see us here on YouTube or find us on the. I do have the audio thing figured out, so podcast is going to be flowing in audio form from this point on. So be sure to check out your favorite podcast delivery system for the audio version. And once again, this has been Painfully Honest, the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast, the podcast so honest it hurts. Today, I guess we have truly broken down the economics of an effective the effective economics of the MacBook ecosystem.
Yes.
So that I hope that was interesting for you. I always love to talk about this stuff. So anyway, until the next time, folks, we are out.